In Manchester, England, there lives a woman whose experiences have challenged the boundaries of what we understand about extraterrestrial contact, consciousness, and the very nature of human existence. Her name is Pauline Delcour-Min, and her story is not simply one of alien abduction. It is a story that reaches back through time itself, suggesting a connection to beings from beyond our world that spans not just years but lifetimes. Pauline's encounters with the unknown began when she was just a teenager. In July of 1964, when she was only 16 years old, she found herself walking through the Cheshire countryside with her best friend. It was a pleasant day, warm and bright, and the two girls chatted easily as they made their way along. There was nothing unusual about the afternoon, nothing to suggest that their lives were about to take a dramatic and inexplicable turn. And then, without any warning or transition, everything changed. The next thing Pauline became aware of was that she was in a field. She was down on her hands and knees, with absolutely no memory of how she had gotten there or what had happened in the intervening time. When she looked up and saw her friend's face, she could tell immediately that her companion was just as confused and disturbed as she was. Neither of them could account for the gap in their memory or explain how they had arrived at this location. As the evening sky began to darken with the setting sun, the two friends decided they needed to make their way home. They set off in what they assumed was the direction they had come from, still shaken and bewildered by their experience. It was during this walk back that a passerby stopped Pauline and pointed out something alarming. There was blood on her leg. When she looked down, she saw that her sock was completely soaked through with it. Upon examining her leg more closely, Pauline discovered a cut on her calf. What struck her as particularly strange was that she felt no pain from the wound at all. Her leg seemed almost numb, cold to the touch. Eventually, the two girls made it home safely. In the days and weeks that followed, the wound healed without any complications, but it left behind a very prominent scar that Pauline would carry for the rest of her life. For nearly 3 decades, that scar remained nothing more than an unexplained mark on her body. By the summer of 1992, Pauline rarely gave it much thought anymore, but that was about to change in a significant way. Her husband, Yi, had been reading a book called Missing Time by Bud Hopkins, which detailed various accounts of alien abduction. When Yi described one particular case to Pauline, both of them were struck by something remarkable. The marking described in the book appeared to be almost identical to the scar on Pauline's leg. This realization sent ripples through Pauline's mind, and suddenly memories she had long forgotten began to surface. She started to recall other episodes of Missing Time, stretching all the way back to her early childhood. She remembered fleeting images of strange objects in the sky and an unsettling feeling that she was being watched or monitored somehow. These were sensations and memories that had been buried deep within her consciousness, but now they were pushing their way back to the surface. By September of 1992, Pauline made a decision. She would undergo hypnotic regression to try and recover the memories of what had actually happened on that summer day in 1964. What emerged during those sessions was both extraordinary and deeply unsettling. Under regression, Pauline recalled that while she and her friend were walking through the countryside, they were suddenly caught up in some kind of energy beam. Before they could comprehend what was happening, they were being lifted off the ground and into the air. They were drawn diagonally upward toward a strange object that hovered above them. As Pauline approached an opening in this craft, she became aware of telepathic messages entering her mind. The voices told her that she would not be harmed, that she would go to sleep, and that she would not remember any of what was happening to her. The next thing she knew, she was inside a strange round room. Tables filled the space, along with various machines and devices that appeared medical in nature. Pauline found herself strapped to one of these tables, and as she looked around, she could see other people being beamed into the room continuously. Each table seemed to have several short, grey alien creatures attending to the person lying upon it. Pauline described these beings in detail. They were small and grey, with spindly arms and legs. Their fingers were like hollow straws. They had large heads dominated by huge black eyes, and each wore a tight-fitting grey suit. During these procedures, information seemed to flow into Pauline's mind, apparently transmitted telepathically by her hosts. She learned that these checks were a regular occurrence and that the Greys maintained a big file on her. She came to understand that the primary purpose behind these abductions was a breeding program. The aliens were attempting to create physical bodies into which they could incarnate. They preferred bodies with long torsos that would provide plenty of room for internal organs, along with long limbs. Pauline learned that she was considered a reserve, a second-class specimen in their terms, but she was still useful to their cloning program. It was during the collection of cells from her body that she had received the wound on her calf. The beings performing the procedure on that particular occasion were apparently limited in their knowledge and experience, and they had caused a larger wound than intended. They ensured the wound would not become infected, and then, telepathically, instructed Pauline not to seek medical attention for it and to let it heal on its own, which of course is exactly what she did. Pauline came to realise during these revelations that the information flowing into her mind was in response to questions she was asking in her thoughts. She understood that thought is more powerful in the dimension these beings operate in. Simply thinking a question would automatically bring the answer. The Greys were aware of this phenomenon and did their best to block memories of these encounters from their subjects, though such memories could be unlocked through hypnotic regression. Years passed after Pauline's initial regression sessions. Then, in August of 1996, another strange incident occurred. Pauline, Yi, and their 2 children had set out on a short holiday to Scotland. Several hours into their journey, things took an unsettling turn. Pauline remembered that the day had been bright for most of their drive, but suddenly the environment around them grew darker. It was then that they noticed a black car driving directly behind them. Pauline recalled that there was something menacing about this vehicle, though she could not identify exactly what. She could tell that Yi was uneasy about it too, but he was unable to pull away because another car was travelling in front of them. Then, without any memory of how it had happened, their car was suddenly overtaking the vehicle ahead of them. Even stranger, the black car behind them had completely vanished. Pauline felt deeply unsettled, as though she had once again experienced an encounter that she could not consciously recall, a feeling shared by Yi. The family continued to their destination and did their best to enjoy their holiday. But when they returned home, Pauline and Yi decided to use regression to discover what had actually occurred on that Scottish road. Under hypnosis, the details emerged. Pauline recalled that as they drove along, a beam of light appeared, slanting diagonally from behind their vehicle. Within moments, they had driven directly into it. The car was drawn into the beam and lifted into the air. She described it as being like a tractor beam. Upon entering it, they became frozen as though time itself had stopped. Pauline remembered looking down at the treetops as their vehicle approached a spherical object hovering overhead. The car was brought through an opening in the side of the craft and placed in a room. Several strange creatures then descended upon it and removed the occupants from the vehicle. These entities were not the greys she had encountered before. They appeared almost cat-like, complete with tails and fur, though they walked on 2 legs. The creatures led the children away to another room. Notably, neither child seemed scared or even surprised by these beings, as if they had encountered them before. Pauline and Yi, however, were both in a strange, zombie-like trance throughout the experience, a state likely induced by their abductors. The couple was led to a room containing 2 tables upon which they were placed. Voices entered their minds, telling them not to be afraid, and then the tables lit up. The light was strange, wrapping around their bodies like a coffin. The next memory Pauline had was of being taken back to their car. The children had already been returned and were asleep in the back seat. After Pauline and Yi were placed inside, the car was lowered back toward the ground via the same beam of light that had lifted them. Halfway down, the car stopped, and the same strange light that had surrounded them on the tables now enveloped the vehicle. Pauline understood that this light was a method of healing and that it was programming them with information. Her next conscious memory was of being in the car with Yi driving, overtaking the vehicle that had been in front of them. This is where their ordinary memories of that strange day had resumed. But Pauline's journey of discovery was far from over. She decided to explore her past lives through regression, suspecting that her connection to these grey beings might run deeper than she had imagined. She asked one of her students, a woman named Francesca, to conduct the regression session at her home in Manchester. Using the same methods Pauline herself employed when performing regression therapy, Francesca guided her into a deep meditative state, back through many years to a former existence. Within moments, Pauline was seeing through the eyes of a previous self that had apparently lived millions of years ago. She began to describe what she was experiencing. She was looking down at her feet, which were grey with 4 toes that were slightly webbed. She had slender legs, a slender body, and slender arms. Her hands had 3 fingers and a small thumb, long and slightly webbed. Then the realization hit her. She stated plainly that she was a grey, a mature adult male whose name was Arcade. As the session continued over several hours, Pauline offered extraordinary details about this past life. As Arcade, she was inside a craft. Though the room was lit, she could see the overwhelming blackness of space outside. There was a constant humming from the machines inside the room, and many other grey creatures were present. They controlled the craft through mental volition, and the machines themselves were aware, responding to their commands as a person would. Pauline explained that random negative thoughts could be very destructive in their society, so they had abandoned individual thinking. Their collective thinking was so powerful that it washed away individual deviations. Survival was paramount. According to Pauline, too much individual thinking had led to greed, and that greed had caused the breakdown of their entire civilization. The grey alien race had terrible troubles with their physical bodies, particularly their digestive systems. They could not nourish themselves adequately and existed on a soup-like drink. Their bodies simply did not function properly anymore. This biological deterioration had also affected their ability to reproduce. They had once reproduced in the same manner as humans and most mammals, but the state of their bodies caused terrible abnormalities in their offspring, forcing them to abandon this method entirely. This degradation had apparently been caused by exposure to radiation when they destroyed their home planet. Even those who managed to flee had already been exposed. They now faced the very real danger of disappearing entirely from the galaxy, though they did possess exceptionally long lifespans. Pauline revealed that there was a hierarchy to this alien society, with those at the top residing in different parts of the galaxy, including on artificial worlds they had created. While their race had bases on various moons, these were merely staging posts and refueling stops. They now permanently travelled through space, searching for a new home. They had journeyed vast distances looking for worlds that could support life in their form, with multiple crafts searching different regions of the universe. Their scanners eventually identified a solar system where the third planet from its star appeared suitable for their purposes. This was Earth long before humanity had evolved. Further studies suggested it was not tremendously suitable to their physiology. However, it was a suitable place for them to regroup and obtain supplies. Pauline recalled memories of landing on Earth, describing it as having a green coastal area with a desert behind them. There were many different fish in the water and various insects on land. The planet was so hot and bright that the Greys mostly sent out robotic devices to scan the terrain. Depression set in among the crew as they realised they were unlikely to find another planet like their destroyed home. Still, Earth provided what they needed to replenish their energy, the first time the crew had felt such vitality within them for a long time. The longer they spent there, the more they recognised how fertile it was for life, even though it was not entirely suitable for them. When they left Earth, they briefly examined the Moon before heading to Mars, the fourth planet. According to Pauline's past life memories, there was water on Mars during this time, and a humanoid population lived there. These Martians were extremely helpful to their visitors. A meeting of their leaders was called to determine how they could assist the Grey alien civilization. The Martians offered the Greys a permanent home in vast tunnel systems beneath the planet's surface, but the offer was declined as it was not suitable for their needs. The Greys left Mars and headed toward the outer reaches of the solar system. Fear set in among the crew. Pauline recalled that they became too frightened to think for themselves. In her past life as Archid, she worked in maintenance, taking orders directly from the taller Greys, who in turn took orders from the machine intelligence, the central computer on their craft that was linked to other vessels. As they were leaving the solar system, the craft was caught in a meteor shower and destroyed. All of the crew perished. Pauline described seeing the aftermath from their astral bodies, looking down at the wreckage of their vessel. They appeared silvery grey, something between a grey and a tadpole. Then something extraordinary happened. Entities that Pauline recalled as beings of light appeared and urged them to go with them to another dimension. She described this other realm as very bright, but not the kind of light that hurts. They were melting into the sun, passing through it, through the dimensions that link them to the Creator, the ultimate source of all being. This is where Pauline's session came to an end, but the revelations she uncovered, if true, have profound implications. They suggest that the Grey aliens conducting abductions around the world are doing so as part of a desperate breeding program to save their dying race, seeking to create physical bodies into which they can incarnate. having destroyed their ability to reproduce naturally through their own catastrophic actions millions of years ago. Perhaps most remarkably, Pauline's experiences suggest that our connections to these otherworldly beings may be far deeper and more complex than simple abductor and abductee. If her past life memories are accurate, some of us may have once existed as the very beings we now encounter in these strange and unsettling experiences. The implications of such a possibility would force us to reconsider not only the nature of alien contact, but the very nature of consciousness, reincarnation, and our place in the universe itself. Of course, it must be acknowledged that Pauline's accounts, however riveting, rest entirely on hypnosis sessions and personal testimony. There is no physical proof, no third-party corroboration, and no way to independently verify her claims. Hypnotic regression, while useful in some therapeutic contexts, is known to produce questionable or even symbolic recollections that may not reflect actual events. Alternative explanations, psychological, cultural, or otherwise, remain entirely possible. Still, certain elements of her story do echo widely reported abduction motifs: missing time, unexplained bodily marks, and telepathic communication. Whether this lends her account credibility or simply reflects the influence of existing UFO lore on her subconscious is impossible to say. In the end, Pauline Delcour-Min's extraordinary claims remain just that: extraordinary, unverified, and open to interpretation.